in my experience in crisis and disaster, true leaders are identified by their actions and their reactions. It's not the position that we hold, it's not the title that we have, it's what we do that matters. And there were four things the Australians did really well. And the first was that they acted with speed. Because when there's an opportunity, it's the first to move that will seize that opportunity and hold that position of leadership. And just by the Australians stepping forward and taking action, people followed. There was nothing special about what we did. There was no real skill set that we had and that others didn't. We didn't lose more people as a country to give us this authority to lead. It was just the fact that we stepped first.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Property Management Podcast. And as always, I'm super grateful that you are joining me for this episode. Now, have you ever felt like you're meant for more? Like you're stuck in a rut going through the motions and deep down, you know, this isn't just it, is it? Like I'm meant for more. There's more to life. Well, today's episode, we're going to shake things up. We're talking about how ordinary people, yes, people just like you and me, can do extraordinary things when we stop playing small, start taking risks, and finally say yes to change. This one's for anyone who's ever felt overwhelmed with too much on their plate, who's afraid to take the leap, or who needs a loving, goosebump-inducing kick up the butt to remember just how capable, powerful, and impactful you really are. My guest today is someone who's stared tragedy in the face and turned it into purpose, impact, and legacy. Peter Baines is a former forensic investigator who spent 2 decades solving some of the world's darkest crimes. He's led international teams through disasters across Thailand, Indonesia, Japan, and Saudi Arabia. He's advised Interpol and the UN on counter-terrorism, but his biggest legacy, well, it started in the aftermath of the 2004 tsunami when he founded Hands Across the Water, a charity that's changed the lives of thousands of children across Thailand and continues to create impact nearly 20 years on. Oh, in case you're wondering, Peter recently ran 1,400 kilometers across Thailand in just 26 days to honor the tsunami's 20th anniversary. That's 33 marathons in 26 days. Crazy, right? So if you're ready to stop playing small, to take one action that could change your life, and to be inspired to do more, want more, and be more, then keep listening. This episode will move you. It might make you tear up a little bit, just like I did, and it will definitely remind you just how extraordinary you truly are. Peter, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm super excited to have you as a guest and to share your amazing story and journey with my audience. So before we dive in, can you share with our audience a little bit about your story and what's led you to where you are today?
Yeah, thanks, Kylie. It's great to be with you. And so for me, I was with New South Wales Police for 23 years and specialised as a forensic practitioner, attending scenes of major crime and homicides and so forth, and identifying, collecting and interpreting physical evidence and presenting that to the courts, and did that for most of the time that I was in the police. And then I guess things changed for me on a professional level. I spent 10 years in Tamworth in regional New South Wales and then moved back to Sydney at a time that was, I guess pretty defining on a global scale, really. It was just after 9/11. Then the Bali bombings in 2002, and then the Boxing Day tsunami in Thailand in 2004. And I'd go to Bali after the bombings as part of the forensic team to identify those who died. And then shortly after, it was only 2 years later, went to Thailand to lead the international identification efforts of the 5,500 bodies we recovered there, and spent most of 2005 in Thailand. And that was, again, another defining moment. And at the end of my time there, I'd go on and work on a highly classified project for Interpol in France, in Lyon in France, and working on what we call CBRN, which is chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. So I was researching the threats and trends on a global scale, and then wrote a secret paper for a couple of the member countries of Interpol on those threats and trends, and then would go on and work with the UN Office of Drug and Crime in Southeast Asia on capacity building and counter-terrorism. And just before my time with Interpol and the last tour of Thailand, I met a group of kids while I was working over there who'd all lost their families, lost their homes, and I started a charity, which you know well, called Hands Across the Water. And I managed the growth of the charity for the first couple of years while I was working full-time with the police. And then I guess it was a bit of a sliding door moment when I came back for the secondment. So being paid by New South Wales Police, but I hadn't been there for 2.5 years. I was working with these external agencies, and then New South Wales Police said, "You've got to come back. We haven't seen you for 2.5 years." And I knew then it was a really, I guess, important time for Hands, because I was raising funds and awareness through travelling and speaking to different organisations on leadership and so forth. And if I stopped the travelling and speaking, because the fees I was being paid, I was using as a donation to Hands, and if I stopped speaking and travelling, I knew the awareness and fundraising for Hands would stop. And so I made a decision. I resigned from the police, and then that kind of set in motion the path that I've been on for 20 years of fundraising, speaking, travelling, and riding bikes and so forth.
Doing some crazy things, let me tell you, and we'll dive into all of that. But I want to start back at the natural disasters and the terrorist attacks. And I think it's fair to say that you've seen your fair share of life's tragedies. And I guess what I would love you to share with our audience is, how do you come out the other side of some of the things that you've witnessed and seen, and some of the families that you've worked with, they've witnessed and seen, and not only be okay with life, but to go on and thrive and create impact and leave a legacy?
Yeah, really good question. And, I often said that the most difficult times that we had in Thailand was dealing with the relatives of those who died. And I also say the most rewarding times I had in Thailand was dealing with the relatives of those who died. It was a beautiful moment, but it was also the most difficult moment. And, the question around how do I spend 20 odd years in that forensic area dealing with the worst of society, and then arriving at a temple in Thailand where there was 3,500 decomposing bodies on the ground. How do you spend time doing that? How do you spend, weeks on end carrying the bodies of dead children and not be severely damaged by that? And because plenty of my colleagues were. And I don't think, Kylie, it's anything that I did or anything special or any strength or skill that I possess. I think it's just luck. I think it's just luck that I came out the other side without PTSD. And as I said, many of my colleagues did not. And, if there was something that I did differently from a mindset or physical or belief or spiritual, you'd tap into that to prevent other people going through it. But I just think it's, for some reason, some people will get cancer and some won't. And there might be factors that you can mitigate, but there's plenty of people who do nothing to bring that on, like they don't smoke or drink or so forth, and still end up with cancer. And so it's kind of the same thing. I don't think I did anything special, but I think one of the things that has certainly served me well is that I've always had something to focus on next. And I guess that was a kind of defining decision for me when I was in Tamworth. I was working in a small section servicing the larger part of the north of New South Wales. And we used to work 10 days straight and then have 4 days off. And of that 10 days, 7 days you're on call. And so you'd get called out all times of the night to, go and do jobs, and it would involve driving hundreds of kilometres to get to the job up in that area. And when I came back to Sydney, the option was to stay and continue doing what I was doing in Tamworth, but because of promotions and so forth, I'd gone as far as I could at Tamworth, so I'd have to leave the specialist area. And I think if I wouldn't have left, there would have been a real good chance that I would have slipped into this, troublesome period of just going, for the next 20 years until I retire, I'll continue to do call and I'll continue to just do the same thing. And I think if there's one thing I did in my career, and it's continued, is continuing to evolve and change and have exciting projects to look forward to. So I wasn't stuck in a rut of what was an unhealthy place to be.
I think that's a great lesson, and it's something that I've dealt with myself recently is embracing change and leaning into the discomfort of change, because obviously as humans we like to keep ourselves safe, and change is terrifying. I haven't lent into as big a changes as you've made, but on a side note, I was actually a journalist in Tamworth back in the 90s, so I know exactly what you're talking about, and I actually dated a policeman back there in the days as well. So yes, I know sort of thing very well. Now, you spoke at an event that I went to recently, and you shared some of the lessons that you learnt from these defining moments or these major events, and that led to you starting Hands Across the Water and the run that you did as well. You crazily ran 1,400 kilometers in 26 days across Thailand. And I know that was not an easy journey, but I'd love you to sort of dive into some of those lessons, across all of those events, and how we can all apply some of those lessons in our everyday lives.
Yeah, the run was something pretty special. I took it on, like, I'm not a runner. I wasn't a marathon runner prior, but with the 20-year anniversary coming up for the Boxing Day tsunami, I knew I wanted to do something significant. And there was three main goals. One was to raise awareness of our presence in Thailand and the work that we're doing and had been doing for close to 20 years. The other was to raise $1 million. And then thirdly, and probably the most important in taking on something that big, was to have a personal goal and to run 60 kilometers a day in the heat and humidity of Thailand. I certainly needed to be connected personally in that. And I think the run certainly taught me some new lessons in life. It reaffirmed a number of beliefs that I had. And, when you talk about what are some of the learnings to come out of what I've done, either through that crisis area or the run, there's a couple of key things that stand out for me. And one of the things that, when I reflect back to Thailand, we arrived as Australians. There was 450 forensic staff from 36 different countries, and there was no international org chart in place that said this is the country that will lead and this is how it will all set up. If you can just imagine, starting a company tomorrow with 450 staff, 36 different countries they come from, and say, okay, we need to make the rules up today because we don't have rules around who's in charge, how it all operates. And a big thing, Kylie, was that the Australians would hold the key leadership position of that international response for many, many months. And it was only until the Australian government said we need to back away from some of these leadership positions that we actually stepped down. And when I think about what it was that the Australians did that put us into those positions of leadership, I think about, in my experience in crisis and disaster, true leaders are identified by their actions and their reactions. It's not the position that we hold. It's not the title that we have. It's what we do that matters. And there were four things the Australians did really well. And the first was that they acted with speed. Because when there's an opportunity, it's the first to move that will seize that opportunity and hold that position of leadership. And just by the Australians stepping forward and taking action, people followed. There was nothing special about what we did. There was no real skill set that we had that others didn't. We didn't lose more people as a country to give us this authority to lead. It was just the fact that we stepped first. The second thing was to deal with change. And you just talked about the significant change that you've gone through. And I think that there was a couple of things that we did well, because as you said, we don't necessarily embrace change well. And the things that the Australians did well in dealing with the change was to deal with the issues of resistance before we met them. And the second was to lead with sensitivity. And I think that it's a really important thing in leading with change, to have a structure in place and to make decisions. But When I think about all of those things and I say, what was the one key thing that positioned the Australians so well? And I saw this when I worked in the Iwate prefecture of Japan following the 2011 tsunami to hit that beautiful country. It's this concept of presence. And, as leaders, we don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to bring about change. But if we're present and those that we're leading see us, they then form two opinions. One, that we care, and second, that we understand the challenges that they're facing. And when we think back to, big, disasters or so forth in Australia within the last, since 2019, 2020, and we had the bushfires that seemed to consume the east coast of Australia. We had COVID and so forth. And we think about our political leaders, and no matter what side of the fence you sit, those leaders that stood out so well. And I'm from New South Wales, and our leader at the time was Gladys. And her presence, just being there, was so reassuring. And I think regardless, as I say, whether you're Liberal or Labor, she was admired for her presence. And then you compare that to Scott Morrison during those fires, who went to Hawaii. And, and it's just this real sign of what that means to those that are affected. And, I think if you ever want, further confirmation of that, think back to those images of Morrison trying to forcibly shake hands with the Rural Fire Service volunteers who wanted nothing to do with him. And it was because he was too late, and there was no expectation upon him to put the fire out. That's not his job. But if he'd been present, it would have said that he cared and he understood. And so that was one of the really big learnings to come out of Thailand and my work over there and the crisis work. And there's so many more. I think about the run that I did. And again, as I said, there was plenty of lessons to come out of there. And if I think about probably the most powerful lesson for me, it was that, this saying that leaders bring the weather. And there was nothing clear about my influence on the support team as to how I finished each day. There were days when I was running 60 kilometres and you'd arrive with, you were pretty broken. And on the back of days and days and weeks of this, you'd arrive at the end of the day, physically I was spent, emotionally I was exhausted, I had nothing left. And if I arrived at the end of the day and if I walked in and my head was down and I looked defeated, then instantly that was a response from the team, that they would look to me as to where my energy was and how I was, and they would respond accordingly. And so if I walked in and was down and kicking stones and just, was feeling the pain, they would be quiet, they would be somber, their heads would be down. However, if I walked in, regardless of physically how I was feeling, if I walked in, had my held up high, was pumping my fist and celebrating that we'd just finished another 60 kilometres, then the team responded accordingly. And as leaders of organisations, of teams, of businesses, and even our family, how we walk through the door, it matters because we bring the weather as leaders. And I think that was such a strong learning for me during the run as to how I finished, how I presented. It had this direct impact upon those around me. And, there were so many more. It was such an incredible time on the road. And, I have such gratitude and privilege for having done it, and something that'll remain with me forever.
I think that's a really powerful lesson, that leaders bring the weather. And something I read on your website has really resonated with me as well. And that was the sentence that said, proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things and you can change the world. So I guess I just want to tap in. And I know you said earlier that it wasn't anything special about you or anything, you didn't necessarily consciously adopt a mindset. But I want to understand a little bit what you sort of say to yourself to get you through. Like, I can only imagine the pain. I mean, I've run a marathon. I've run a couple of marathons. That's 40 kilometres or 42 kilometres, and that's one day. And I've got years to recover. What do you say to yourself? How do you get up when your body's busted? I know you had a lot of injuries, shin splints. What do you say to get through, like, not only to get started, but then to get to the end of that 60-kilometre day? Give me something.
Are you feeling overwhelmed and thinking about selling your rent roll? Don't worry, you're not alone, and HDNU is here to help. Whether you're ready to sell now or you just want to plan for the future, the friendly and approachable team at HDNU makes the process simple and stress-free. Hello, yes please. With over 30 years of expertise, they're not just about crunching the numbers. They genuinely care about helping you maximize your agency's value and get the best outcome for you. Their sales readiness bundle is like having a trusted advisor by your side. They'll work closely with you to assess your agency's key factors, create an easy to understand heat map of your strengths and opportunities, and then sit down with you for a 90-minute workshop to guide you on what to do next. They'll look at everything from rent roll earnings and rent arrears to compliance and team performance and explain it all in plain English. If you're planning to sell soon, HDNU can even handle the whole process for you, from finding qualified buyers to negotiating the deal. Their friendly, professional team takes the stress out of selling so you can feel confident every step of the way. And to get started, simply book in a meeting with the team today. Their link is in the show notes. They're here to help you move forward with confidence. Let's be real. Compliance is one of the biggest challenges in property management, and it can be overwhelming to navigate. It's time-consuming, stressful, and let's face it, one missed compliance check could lead to serious legal and financial risks, and no one wants that. That's where Sensor Insure comes in. Powered by smart sensor technology, it offers highly competitive building and landlord insurance, bundled with an ecosystem of smart safety devices. These include tamper-proof smoke alarms and water leak detectors with automated remote testing and a 24/7 accessible audit trail. Yes, you heard me right. Sensor Insure is a game changer. It's always on and integrates seamlessly with your trust platform to streamline processes and provides live reporting across your entire rental portfolio. This ensures you're always meeting compliance requirements, giving you total peace of mind. No more waking up in the middle of the night stressed or worried that you've missed something or your team has missed something. So whether you're looking to improve your processes and efficiency, reduce stress, or protect your agency from risk, Sensor Insure has you covered. You really should see how it works. I totally encourage you to book in a free demo today by heading to sensorglobal.com or the show notes to learn more about their solutions and how they can transform your compliance game.
Yeah, look, it was, I sit here, as you say that, I get goosebumps because it was such an incredible time, and it was the best thing I've ever done in my life, and I miss it every day. I miss the entire part of it, like the pain, the elation, everything I miss about it. But, it was something that had to be about what I was willing to do, not what I thought I was capable of, because we don't know we're capable of something until we've done it. And how could I know that I was capable of running 26 days and 60 kilometres a day for 1,400 kilometres? Prior to this, prior to the training for the Run to Remember, I'd only ever done one road marathon, and I didn't particularly like it. And I've done a number of ultra marathons through the bush, but very different. And I think there's a couple of things in that. One is that having a really clear reason for doing it. And for me, the fear of failure was so great that I just couldn't entertain it. And it was a really interesting reflection for me. On Christmas Day, Chris, my father-in-law, who was the captain on the road, he was the driver of the support vehicle, we sat at Christmas lunch and we had 26 kilometres to go and it was over, and he said to me, "At what point did you think you'd be able to do this?" And I said to him, "What's really interesting, Chris, is I never doubted it." And that is such a different mindset for me, because I am someone who has a lot of doubts about my ability and worth and contribution. And, I stand at the start line of many ultra marathons wondering if I'll be able to do it. But here I was standing at the start line of 1,400 kilometres, and I never doubted that I was able to that I was going to finish. And I think the fear of failure just was so great that I wouldn't entertain it. Even day 14, which was a really, important day, and again, a defining day where I had these shin splints, and it was so painful. And it was, if you haven't had shin splints, it's hard to imagine, but I describe it as like someone sticking a screwdriver into the bone in your leg, and the recovery is rest. And I had 12 days to go. And the medic on our team would say that I ended up with a stress fracture in the leg and that continued to run. And I think there's a couple of things for it. One was you've got to understand your why, but this was another learning for me, is that sitting on day 14 at lunch where I had 18 kilometres to go and I was busted and broken, I'd never even then did I feel like I wouldn't finish the day or I wouldn't finish the run. But thinking about the why was too big. It had to be something smaller. And this is where I think the importance of how is just as important as why. And for me, the how was, I knew the trigger for me was that as soon as I put my shoes and socks on, that meant it was go time, and I could sit, and I sat for quite a while at that lunch stop on day 14. And I don't know, Kylie, what the conversation in the team was, because I came in broken and they hadn't seen me that bad. And I don't know if they thought the run was in jeopardy, or if at least that day was in jeopardy. But as soon as I decided in my mind that it was time to put my socks on and put my shoes on, then it meant go. And I think it was the case for me in breaking down 60 kilometres each day. It was that breaking down it into 5-kilometre stages, because that's when I'd then take on fuel and water and electrolytes. And then I had a couple of major milestones of 20 kilometres, which was morning tea, and then 40 kilometres, which was lunch. And then from 40 kilometres, I have a half marathon to go. And the interesting thing was the fastest 10 kilometres over any day was always the last 10 kilometres. And waking up at 4:30 in the morning every day to have my wife stick needles into the blisters to drain the fluid that had been built up overnight, and strap my feet. And it was just a case of taking the action, which was getting dressed, having breakfast, having a coffee, putting your headlamp on and starting. And I didn't start fast. I didn't have to race out of the mothership to start the day. But it's just taking action gets you closer. And so for me, it was a whole series of things, but having that undeniable desire to finish and knowing the surest way to fail is to quit. And I kept telling myself that the pain I was experiencing any day, it would pass with just enough recovery time, but the pain of quitting would last with me forever. And that's something I couldn't entertain, given it was so big, given it was a one-off opportunity. I couldn't go back and do it the next year. I had so many people supporting me on the road, from home, making financial contributions. And the thought of not finishing, I honestly don't know how I would have dealt with it if I hadn't have finished.
Yeah. Nobody would ever call you a quitter, I don't think, Peter. So I look at that as just such an inspirational story. And I was lucky enough to do the bike ride in Thailand. You backed that run up with 1,400 kilometres with another 500-kilometre bike ride in Thailand. I don't know whether that was your first or second or third after the bike ride. But to be honest, I didn't think I would get through 500 kilometres riding a bike in 5 days. But here I am, I've done that. And that ride was transformational, to say the least, not just physically, emotionally, mentally. It ticked so many amazing boxes for me, to the fact that I've actually signed up to do it again next year. So I guess for anyone listening, what are some of the ways that they can get involved, or maybe share a bit about Hands Across the Water? And what are some of the ways that they can get in and help it? Again, like that message about ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And I think that's what underlying is what Hands Across the Water actually does for people.
Yeah, and I'm so pleased to know that you're coming back. And like my 1,400-kilometre run was the biggest thing that I've done. But I think if we compare ourselves, and I certainly had this experience of comparing myself to Ned Brockman, who was running in September just before my training. And comparison is the thief of joy. And I suffered from proximity to Ned because we shared the same coach, and watching him thinking it's not big enough. And the biggest thing we do is the biggest thing we'll do. It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing, and we think about it from a business perspective. If we're always looking at someone who's sold more or earned more or gone further or higher or whatever, we'll never be content with what we've got. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as well. And with Hands, I started Hands Across the Water, charity to support kids and communities in Thailand on the back of the work I did in Thailand. And it started with the tsunami kids. And I thought, I was working full-time in the police, and I thought if I build them a home, their problems will be over and I can go back to doing what I do. And it was only when I opened the first home in 2007 that I realised the job hadn't finished, it had only just begun. And now we operate in all different locations through Thailand, and Claire, who's our CEO, and my wife is actually in Bangkok as we speak, and wrote to me yesterday and said she's visited a couple of new projects that could be something that we look to support. So there's, evolution, there's growth. And I think the key for us, though, Kylie, is why you're coming back to do the ride. And I think that a lot of people will get involved in charity, and particularly with Hands, to think that they're doing something for someone else. And then they realise the benefits that they take from it. And for us, that's very deliberate, is that we look to return value to our supporters, our donors, our sponsors. Because if we rely just on someone feeling bad or guilt, or put pressure on them to donate or something like that, or use sad photos of kids, that's never going to be part of what we're about, and it won't last, and it's not sustainable. And I think when we look at these bike rides that we run, I've done 43 of them now, and the one we did together was my third for the year, and I've done another couple this year, and we've got 6 next year. We've just signed a new corporate client who's riding with us next year. And the reason they come, and you can attest to this, is because of that personal journey that you have, one of growth, one of self-belief, one of you develop resilience, and the reward is commensurate to the sacrifice and struggle. And the harder the journey is, the greater the reward. And for Hands, we've had this growth. And if we tried to rely on people feeling sorry for kids in Thailand, we would have had to have closed our doors many years ago. There's 60,000 charities in Australia. And for us to try to get support for kids in Thailand just because the kids need support, it never would work. But we have this growth, we have this high retention rate because we deliver value. And, our bike rides, as you can test, they're not, it's a tour on a bike as opposed to this bike ride where it's about riding as fast as you can. It's developing relationships. It's having personal time when you're riding in silence on your own to think and contemplate. It's riding with people you've known for a long time, but then you go to depths in the conversation you wouldn't have before. You meet new people, and very quickly you have these really meaningful conversations. And it's such a key part of what we do. You have 5 or 8 days on a bike with someone, and it builds really strong relationships. And I think one of our riders summed it up the best. He said, I fundraise for the kids, but I ride for myself. And that's the key of our bike rides.
Absolutely. And I've formed some amazing friendships. I've got another guest, my next guest on the podcast is Chris Henry. And Joanna and I live very close to each other now. So we catch up and we call them walkies and talkies. So we catch up once a week and walk. So it is about creating new friendships and networking. And of course, the ultimate goal is to raise as much money as we possibly can for the kids. And probably the highlight will always be that end day where we ride into the children's home, get to meet them, spend some time with them, and see all the amazing work that you guys do. Which I don't think a lot of other charity organisations, you don't actually get to see the end product, which I think makes it the journey more powerful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important. Like if we want trust, if we want people to trust us how we use the money, then the best thing you can do is be transparent. And from a financial, and obviously not everyone gets a chance to go to Thailand or wants to go to Thailand, but trust and transparency and integrity is through everything we do, and all of our financials, and have been forever, are posted on our website. All our accounts are audited by external auditors, and so people can see where our money is spent, and we're really proud of that fact. But equally, when someone like yourself or if a family on holidays in Thailand wants to call in and see the work that we do, we always facilitate that, because absolutely, it's nice to be able to see what the change is doing. And some of the money has to go into just running costs of food and maintenance and power bills and all that stuff that's not very sexy, but it's what creates the futures for the kids. It's that kind of funding that sees us have 56 kids from across all the homes that we run who have graduated from university, and creating these real meaningful, sustainable opportunities for the kids. And as we say, creating a life of choice and brighter futures. And when people can see that, they can see the journey of the kids. And we've got people that have been riding with us for a decade or more who have, arrived and to have seen young kids, 3, 4, 5 or 6, and now they're teenagers and have seen the transformation of these kids. They see the homes that we have as just big homes. And we recognise, and always have, Kylie, that the best place for kids, all things being equal, is in a family, no matter what that family is made up of. But when things aren't equal, when that family is not an option, or where it's not a safe environment, we offer an alternative. And the kids that come to us now are brought to us by the government agencies, by the welfare department, by the police, by the hospitals, who see the support that we offer, the level of care, and they ask us to place these kids where they have no other option in Thailand. And so that kind of that accessibility, where you're not intruding on their life, but you can see where the money goes, is really important.
Absolutely. No, you do a great job with all of that. Now, I usually ask people at this point of the podcast to share a personal development tool, but I think you've shared plenty of personal development lessons and advice through your journey. So I'm going to skip that question for you, but I'd love you to share with how our audience can connect further with you, how they can join the bike ride. What are the best places for them to visit?
Yeah, great. So, it's really exciting for me. I've written my 4th book, and it's out in a couple of weeks, and it's called Together We Can, and it's on all of the Amazons and Booktopia, or just through my website, which is peterbaines.com.au, or through the Hands Across the Water website. And I love it was a really enjoyable book to write, Kylie. As I said, it's my 4th book. And while there's a deep reflection of the run, and the run was a celebration of team, not just what I did, but it also looks at the 20 years of Hands. And so that will be available. Well, you can order it now. It'll be out in September. There'll be the audio book, the ebook, and that gives people an insight into the background and the stories of not just the run, but also Hands. And then if people are interested in learning more about Hands, the good place to start is the website, handsacrossthewater.org.au. And then we all have our social channels, as everyone does with Insta, and that gives an insight into what we do as well.
Amazing. I will share all of those links in the show note. Congrats on the book. And Peter, thank you so much for having such an amazing conversation with me. I'm super grateful for you.
Oh, thanks, Kylie. I look forward to riding with you again next year.
Hopefully I'll get back on the bike at some stage and get some into my legs again.
Good on you.
If you're ready to be a super organised, focused and productive property manager, buckle up, because Colmio is about to revolutionise the way that you work. Colmio is the driving force behind property management excellence in residential real estate. Now picture this, a comprehensive end-to-end system designed to be the beating heart of your property management tasks, manage your properties, owners and tenants, and handle payments, inspections, and even marketing listings without leaving the platform. Colmio is designed to be an all-in-one solution to all your property management needs. And here's the game changer. Colmio isn't just software. It's been awarded the most innovative prop tech scale up in 2023. Yes, you heard it right. Colmio has been recognised for their groundbreaking approach to property management software. How good is that? So property managers, whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, dive into the future of property management with Colmio. You can book in a demo with the team today and go in their weekly draw for a Prezi gift card worth $100. All you need to do is to head to the link colmio.com/thatpropertymum, and Colmio is KOLMEO. Can I ask you a quick favour before you leave this episode? Now, we all know how important reviews are for businesses these days, and mine is no different. If you could spare just a minute to follow, rate and review this podcast, it would mean a lot to me. In fact, what would get me super excited is if you share this podcast with someone in the industry who you think might need to hear some of the episodes right now. And if you'd like to find out more about working with me or any of the products I have to help you start, grow or scale your property management business, head to my website, thatpropertymum.com.au, or check out the links in the show notes.